Started. I guess it just automatically started recording. That's interesting. Great. Okay. Welcome everyone to the Militarized Equipment Ad Hoc meeting. It is Monday, April 10th at 6:06 p.m. We're a little bit of a smaller group today. I think today we will start with explosive breaching and see if we can finish any additional comments or going through that. And then after that, have some discussions about the annual report for militarized equipment. We just got a copy of the latest draft of the annual report. Thank you, Lieutenant Febble. But we'll take that when we are done with explosive breaching. Let's see. Breaching is Lieutenant Toribio, right?
Yes, sir. I had sent out a copy after the last meeting of the updated training bulletin and impact report. Is there one in particular that anyone would care to start with in terms of comments or any final questions or revision requests? I have them both up. I can share my screen and pull up either one to start. If not, I'll just go to the training bulletin.
I did not have anything for the training bulletin. Ms. Tu, did you?
I do not.
Okay. Let me pull up the impact report, which I figured if there was one of the two that would need some updates or revisions, that would be it. And let me get to sharing my screen. Okay. I did the option. Hopefully it's working. I'm so lost when it comes to Zoom. Does this look okay, everybody?
It's up. It looks good.
Let me zoom it up a little bit so hopefully folks can read it a little better. Okay. Does anybody want to start with a question, comment, or revision, or should I just kind of ask based on each section or page? Yeah. Okay.
Let's go with each section or page. Yeah.
Okay. So we're here with the description and description and purpose. Anything for any of the items here? And I'll just scroll through slowly so we can see. Nothing so far, folks. Okay, under initial costs, estimated or anticipated costs for each proposed use.
Since we're here, did Lieutenant Terabia, do you or Sergeant Cardona, I know Sergeant Cardona isn't here, anticipate purchases in the coming year?
I'd have to check with him, and that would only be based on, if I'm not mistaken, anything that's expiring, that, you know, like stuff's not going to be any good, and, you know, if we'd have to purchase based on that.
Yeah, let's rather than having to deal with like an emergency request or something that's coming up, there is a section above that talks about, I think it's just right above, proposes to obtain the equipment
Box.
right.
Oh, gotcha. So I would just have to ensure that if whether or not this box needs to be checked and what needs to be added.
Right. And then after this year, after this policy is done, then I think they generally would go into the annual report. So
that's my understanding as well. Yeah. Okay.
this is kind of just an idle question. What do you do with expired equipment?
It's a good question. I'm curious myself.
Oh no, now you're scaring me.
No, I'm pretty sure that they use it during training. If it comes up for being expired, they try to use it during the SWAT trainings.
Yeah, I know we do that with chemical munitions. You know, if we have CS blaster stuff that's expired, we do that at training. And I think the reason why that's okay is because the stuff becomes inert, or like the charges or the igniters, go bad. I'll just confirm if that's the case with these materials, and that there isn't any issues. I don't know if stuff's like collected and then given to the ATF, or if it's okay still to use at training. So I'll confirm all that.
Yeah, I'm mostly curious if there's like a magazine that's collecting more and more and more expired explosives.
Yeah, I'll confirm that, but I don't believe that storage has been an issue, because anytime, from my understanding, anytime material is purchased, it comes with the additional containers for said goods. They're not shipped raw, so to speak, and then we're then incumbent to house that material in existing stuff that we purchase or purchase separately. It comes contained in authorized packaging from the ATF, or by the ATF rather. Okay, so we got that checked. Estimated costs or anticipated costs, ongoing costs. Impacts, specifically reasonably anticipated impacts. Impact on persons. Under mitigations, use of force and de-escalation policy. Force reporting and review policy and practice. Complaint and receipt investigation procedures. Community outreach and specific inquiry pathways. Equipment specific use policy and police commission oversight. Tech safeguards. Procedural safeguards. De-escalation and alternative strategies under alternatives. Location. Third-party dependence. And track record. Okay, that was the last page. Anything further on this?
I had one question, but I'm not really sure where it would fall. One thing that I was thinking about as I was looking at your draft was the explosive breaching only gets deployed in a subset of circumstances in which any breaching would occur. And so far the track record is 0, which is great. And one thing I was thinking about was in any breaching situation, explosive or not, I'm assuming that this is going to be a more elevated emotionally and a more charged situation. And I'm wondering if the situations in which explosive breaching would be used would also be a more amped up situation beyond regular breaching.
Could you think you can rephrase that question? I think
Yeah.
was it just a situational question? Like, is it anticipated that when an explosive breach will be used, it's going to be in kind of
Yeah.
a highly charged? I mean,
Let me try rephrasing. What I'm thinking about is the circumstances in which breaching happens. What I kind of have in my head is that any officer involved is going to be a little bit more on edge, a little bit more prepared for something bad to happen. And I'm wondering if that's a correct assessment or correct assumption. And if explosive breaching is involved, if that would increase the tension of the environment. I'm wondering when explosive breaching is used, if it's going to be in a more emotionally charged circumstance than regular breaching.
so it's an interesting question. It's kind of hard to answer, seeing how we don't have any data or background for it. On one hand, if you're thinking theoretically, this is an option that's going to be used when either other breaching options have been exhausted or they're just going to be determined to kind of be impractical. But on another hand, it also depends kind of on the role and the mindset of the players involved, because in some respects, it sounds weird, but kind of in the way we operate, it's like it's a problem to be solved, and it's a step towards solving that problem. So that just has to go with kind of like any other stress involved in the job. It's okay. What's the outcome here? What's the desired outcome? What's the process for the outcome? And then it's a matter of execution. So it's an interesting question. I don't quite know how to answer it. And there are just so many factors kind of involved, even on just a personal level, for any of the players involved, even before like, let's say we're going to employ an explosive breach. Obviously the situation itself is going to have kind of some energy to it. And that energy is felt by everybody, including just people observing, etc. So in some respects, some people observing may not know the information that officers know, and so they might have a lower sense of kind of energy or tension of it. So it really kind of is variable.
Let me try to ask a few more questions. Ms. Tu, when you ask that question, are you thinking that perhaps there should be additional procedural safeguards because of the idea that, when the department decides to use an explosive breach, it necessarily maybe involves, the imminent loss of life, which may be a more charged situation, whether it's emotionally or otherwise.
I'm not sure about additional procedural. Just from the track record, it seems like the procedures that are in place are serving the department well in providing those little checks of, is this what we really should be doing? I think I was more thinking about it in terms of some kind of impact of potentially impact on the on community. If it's a tense situation, explosives probably will increase that tension and could lead to escalations. I'm also thinking about the impact on officers and how that could the presence of explosives, even though it's something that they train with on the regular, given that it's not something that is a regular occurrence, could that lead to different decisions that they might make compared to their day-to-day. So that's kind of where I'm going, but I'm afraid I haven't really thought this one completely through yet.
I think it kind of sounds like, and tell me if I'm wrong and tell me if I'm just off the mark, that the thought is that because we're dealing with explosives and because we're dealing with something that it's unique, not something that happens very often. It is a causes stress, causes anxiety, causes physical and mental effects, period. That could be a reasonably anticipated impact that perhaps may or should go into an impact report separate from, say, the physical impacts that have been laid out in this particular report. Kind of like I don't mean to describe it this way, but it is what kind of comes to mind, which is people who are in countries that are, in the middle of war and undergoing bombings and shellings, and the impacts that may have on their psyche or on their well-being. Is it something like that?
I think so. I'm also thinking about it. I know that our department is they're very professional. They do a lot of training, and I just have a hard time imagining that being in a situation in which explosive breaching is called for. So not necessarily the presence of the explosive breaching, but if you've gone to a point in which you've decided explosive breaching is absolutely required for what's next, I just have a hard time imagining that everyone is going to be perfectly adrenaline free, and that everyone's going to be making the same decisions that they would make in on a beautiful sunny day when everyone looks totally happy. But maybe I might be making assumptions, so I'm wondering if the department could speak to that a little bit.
No, I think that anytime there's stress in a situation that affects things, and we constantly preach. So I'm the primary instructor for patrol procedures, and incidentally, we're starting that learning block in the academy this Wednesday. And when one of the main points that I try to drive into trainees is that the success, one of the big keys to success for an officer is to be able to make good decisions under stress. And it's not about how fast you can run or how well you're able to hit a target when you're at the range, or how strong you are to be able to kick in a door to save somebody if needed. It's the ability to
not kick in the door, maybe.
Oh, for sure. And so when I was in the training division and taught in the range for 4 years to cover several academy classes, and the thing that I taught in firearms was it doesn't matter. I can teach anybody to shoot a tight group of rounds on a target, and anybody can be taught to do that. The most important thing about firearms isn't about being able to shoot that tight group. It's knowing when and when not to pull the trigger. And, that's why, we're such big advocates of stress inoculation training, because, anybody can be shown a process and follow a process, but how well are they able to recall that process when they're under stress? And so that's why we offer stress inoculation training. And that's why I'm personally such a big advocate of that.
I might suggest that I don't know that we'll be able to come to what exactly it is that I'm hoping might get added here tonight. And I hope that if anyone else has some ideas afterwards, that you'll bring them up. And I'll keep thinking about this, but I also don't want to delay this further just because I have something that I'm trying to think about and haven't quite figured out exactly what it is yet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open for whatever's gonna, improve either the training bulletin or the impact report, or the training or execution of us implementing this. Again, I'll say day to day procedurally, at any given call, an officer is going to have to make and recall training under varying degrees of stress. And to say that it's in some degree not going to be magnified when we're employing a novel process or procedure, that's just ignorant for me to say. I mean, absolutely. If we're going to be doing any rare type of procedure or process, there's going to be some element, but that's why I'm such a big advocate of training and pushing training, and we need more and more training and train how we work in the field and try to replicate the situations. So I see your point, and I'm open to looking at how we can address that or cover it in the impact report or training bulletin. Completely open to it. I guess, and I'm glad that this is coming up, because from my view, I see it more of just in a systematic way. And, it's like, I see like a breach or I see the need to deploy stop sticks on a car or to box a car in with armored vehicle, more of just a process, a step. And I'm able to kind of compartmentalize that just by out of necessity, right? Because we need to be able to operate under stressful conditions, and through repetition of training, it becomes more of like a process, and we're able to do that successfully without letting like the stresses kind of affect us.
I kind of like what you said earlier, if it's not too much trouble to add someplace into the impacts about, you said something about how the explosive breaching would magnify the stresses. And I feel like that's something like that's an anticipated impact. And that'd be great to include if you feel up for it. Yeah, because it's not like it's stresses on the officers who are present, stresses on the community who are present, stresses people who are stressed out are not going to be communicating and interacting with other humans at their best. And so any kind of officer community engagement that happens in that situation is probably not going to be what might be optimal.
I would suggest that it goes into the impact on person section under reasonably anticipated impacts. And I think your procedural safeguards well, I don't know that you necessarily have a mitigation in there at the moment. I think that perhaps the mitigations are in the procedural safeguards, in that you have requirements on training, both within the unit and with the entry team, so that you ensure that it's not just the explosive breachers that are used to and trained with explosive breaching, but also the entry team, so that they build that muscle memory and that training and that response. It is probably also a mitigation. Well, let me ask, in breaching situations, since we can't use explosive breaching situations, in breaching situations, does DVP come out, or have they before?
I don't know. Not as a matter of course. Like if we use like a RAM to gain access to a residence, or sometimes if a perimeter team is trying to get access to a yard and they cut a lock on a gate. It hasn't been standard that alone would kind of meet a threshold or meet kind of like a criteria where we'd call DVP.
Since chemical agents is probably closer to explosive breaching than standard breaching, does DVP come out for those?
Not typically, no. Not at least in my experience on tactical operations, and in sideshow in times where we've had to. Not in again. I can only speak from my experience here and reading kind of after action reports. I don't believe DVP has been activated for those instances.
Are there situations, say like tactical team entries, search warrant, or whatever it might be, where there just are a lot of non-suspects who are there who might get affected by what's happening? And
Yes.
if
So, like,
so, what are the mitigations, if any?
So what we typically do, we have and gosh, I wish we had somebody from our tactical negotiations team. They're typically brought to like if they're not involved. Let's say we're serving a high risk like search warrant, and there's a tactical team activation, and we go to the location, and there's a bunch of people inside an apartment who are not the target, but are being called out as a matter of execution of the warrant. Typically, what happens is after they're briefed by the negotiations team, they'll be accommodated either by being allowed to a designated section of the home, or if for whatever reason there's a long delay before we can go inside, hand check it, and then allow like family or occupants to go inside, we'll have like away team vans or vans that the negotiations team have, and then we'll allow them to sit in vans. We'll get them like food and drinks, etc. And that's been kind of like the typical accommodations that we've made.
Okay. Okay. So I think, Lieutenant Turbia, you maybe are getting that you may be able to see where my questions are going, and kind of in line with Ms. Tu's comments that I think that part of I wouldn't even call it distrust necessarily, but part of the relationship that OPD has with his community are going to be on those members of the community that are not necessarily the targets, but maybe maybe impacted persons nonetheless. It's and I'm not saying it should go into this particular policy, but those particular situations I feel like I have seen are often a lot more upsetting and a lot more formative experiences for members of the community than those who get arrested sometimes. I think that we should probably have some more thinking around this, maybe not necessarily for this impact report, but in general. I don't know where that's going to come from. I don't know what it's going to look like or what it might be. But I do see it as an interface point with that community that OPD has with the community. I appreciate that the negotiating team does have sort of a place for people to go when their homes are being searched. And I wonder what more we can be done about that particular situation. That is, of course, a unique situation, as is this. And it's something to think about, but I doubt that we're going to solve this particular issue or be able to advance it tonight.
Yeah, I think that it's encompassing something kind of beyond this, but for sure worth discussion.
Okay. anything else on the impact report? Thank you and Sergeant Cardona for the work.
Thank you.
Not hearing anything. I got word that Commissioner Jordan is not going to be joining us. So let's maybe do a quick pass through on the training bulletin.
Okay. Okay, here we are with the explosive breaching training bulletin. And can I just get a nod if it's looking on the appearing on the screen? Perfect.
Yes.
Okay.
Perhaps you could just take us to where the most recent set of changes were, if you recall them.
Yeah, I do. So we discussed them last time, but hopefully it's had time to marinate. And so this was this section here. So what needs to be in the final version are footnotes or an appendix that defines these. It's referenced, but I think it was the decision of the group here that reference is cool, but just for easy access or just for easy reference to have these defined here, either in a footnote or in an appendix. So talks about when we're able to employ. I'm sorry, Ms. Tu, go ahead.
Oh, just a quick note. It's not about the ease of access, though that helps too. It's that
There was no, it's not online.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Public facing, right?
Yeah. Okay, there we go. I stand corrected. So one way or another, whether it is listed here in an appendix, in a footnote, or if we get this guy uploaded for public access, the reader or anybody inquiring will be able to see these definitions as described under 3P02. So this section lists when explosive breaching may be used. And so it is in training, incidents involving both tactical team deployment and in these situations as defined under 3P2 to include barricaded suspects, hostages, and active shooters. And then also disasters and rescue operations where people are entrapped in buildings or other structures. All of these conditions, sans training, as we discussed last time, require that explosive breaching is employed only when non-explosive breaching options are impractical or have been exhausted, or delay caused by employing those options would significantly contribute to the imminent loss of life. The final section for when we breach deals with applying an explosive breaching charge to a vehicle, and it shall only be done when the needs meet all the above criteria, and only when the need to employ an explosive breach outweighs the risk to the vehicle occupants and bystanders, and explicitly states that otherwise it's prohibited. So this was kind of like the final talking point that we had regarding this training bulletin. Feedback.
Thank you. I do see that the department, to sort of the decision in taking away that sentence, circumstances where human life is at imminent risk, and instead restricting it to disasters and rescue operations is a restriction. It is sort of a limiter. It takes away situations where the department may want to use it, but very clearly states the situations that you did want to use it, which is what our main conversation point was. Let's see. Can you take us to, just very briefly, the prohibited uses section so we can compare that to this section?
Yes. Okay. this is the section here. I think I can get it all on the screen here. So this is broken up into bullet points with a couple other sections below them. So if you guys want to peruse this, this was the first bullet point has to deal with breaching unknown mediums. The second is presence of flammable or unstable chemicals or incendiary materials. And then the third is, I think, a repackaging or representation that it's when other breaching options are have been it's another way of wording that we need to exhaust other breaching options. And the way it's reworded here is if another means of breaching is more effective or practical, we have to use that and not explosive breaching. Based on some use of explosives in other agencies, we wanted to make sure that we were explicit in that we don't use explosive breaches as like a hand-thrown item, and that we do not deploy these at a person or an animal. It's used only to breach a medium in order to abate the loss of life. And then the final point was about mutual aid and how we shall not use mutual aid as a means of bypassing like any provision or prohibition for explosive breaching as defined in this training bulletin. Thoughts? Does anything here kind of conflict with the authorized? Oh, I guess they by nature conflict, but anything here kind of make for a loophole in what's authorized? So I'd like to close it off as much as possible. I think what's listed in the authorized uses is pretty good at explaining when we can do it. I think this section here reinforces situations where we cannot use it.
No, I think it definitely does that. The first point sort of has this prohibition against using it. Let's say I think the first bullet point comes into play when it's not needed to prevent the imminent loss of life, but other breaching methods have been tried.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be the situation where it would apply and said, no, you can't do it unless, because we have imminent loss of life above.
Correct.
The presence of known flammable or unstable chemicals has been something that both is trained on and has been a constant in the prohibited uses since the first portion, and very clearly calling out not targeting a person or an animal. Ms. Tu?
Yeah, I agree that I can't see any loopholes right now. The only side case that I can see is for the presence of known flammables. What if it doesn't have a potential of combusting, but does have the potential of being on fire?
I think it's covered under this component here.
I think combusting.
Okay.
Fire is
okay.
combusting. Yeah. I think fire is combusting. Oh wait, no, it's the or. Sorry.
Yeah, that or was tripping me up. I'm not sure how to read it.
Okay, sorry. Let me read this with the
No worries. It's
fresh eyes.
I see, because the with the potential of combusting as a result of an explosive breach modifies the other incendiary materials, not the entire
There's a presence.
I think the way you clarify that is there's a presence of known flammable, unstable chemicals, or there are other incendiary materials.
And leave the rest. Is that looking okay, guys?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Now, will you take us back to authorized uses one more time?
Yes, of course.
Just let's all take a look at this for a second and see if we can finish this off, or if there's any other comments. Were there any other sections that there were significant edits to in the last?
No, this was the only one. Let me just scroll to the bottom because I'm certain we came into accordance through the prior reviews. But let me just scroll up now. But I know the authorized uses was the last hurdle. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Let me take a quick look. Okay. I am complete on these. Anybody else? All right, here is what I may suggest. I think for the training bulletin, you can go ahead and clear all of the edits.
Okay.
I think with the impact report, once you get those 2 additional things in, you should be able to get a sort of final working copy.
Mm-hmm.
And let's all take, and then let's circulate that. That probably, I don't want to tell you how long it's going to take. How long do you think it will take to do that?
I'll get it to you. I'll get it to you tomorrow. I'll get it to you guys tomorrow.
And then perhaps we could do one final round for the people who weren't able to make it today, and just put our stamp. I wouldn't say approval, but put approval on it by the 24th. And then send it off to the commission, unless I don't think it needs to go through any other review, does it?
I don't believe so.
No,
Bill,
it
Bill or
doesn't,
Jeff?
no.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, hearing knows. Okay, excellent. If we get it cleared by the 24th, then perhaps it could go on the same day as the annual report on May 11th for the commission meeting.
Perfect.
And then we can finally wrap those up.
All right. Thank you all. And yeah, tomorrow I'll have time all morning to work on this. So by the afternoon I'll have it to the full group. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. Lieutenant Febel, are you there?
Indeed, sir.
Thank you for all your work in the annual report. I haven't gone through to see all the changes. I do see some pictures. I do see some track changes. Do you think you could walk us through some of those things?
Yeah, I think just keeping it fundamentally simple is we did exactly what Ms. 2 suggested, right? We revisited 481 and we revisited 965 and just bullet pointed, it says you need to have exactly A, B, C, D, and E, right? And then we formatted it into the annual report. And of course, some of that information we had to reach out for has been very challenging. It's not something I think the department expected 10 years ago to have to track or ever get. But we're working with our old partners here at the agency. So let me see if I could share my screen here. Okay. So you guys can see the yellow and the red.
Cannot see.
Cannot see it, sir? All right, here we go. Can you see it now?
There it is.
Great. Okay. So we kind of had in the last meeting, basically, there was a number of things that we highlighted in the bottom of the report, right? Because some of that information.
Lieutenant, do you mind going to view and making the width fill the screen a little bit more, or zoom in just a little bit? Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jennifer. I have 40-year-old eyesight. It doesn't help me much, so I appreciate you doing that. So what we basically have one of two choices, right? We could literally, like you see right here, when it goes under ongoing cost per year, and we broke it down verbatim to what it says in the law, and it breaks it down into each one. Another option that we had, you see up here, anticipated number of units to purchase next year. We're still working with our range staff on that. Some of these, obviously, like a Lenco rescue vehicle, is going to be a 0, right? Other ones like chemical munitions can be particularly difficult because in a good year, right, a year of peace, we might go through a dozen, right, just for training. In an unfortunate year, we could go through hundreds. So he's trying to work with historical data to get a best analysis of what we believe we may need for 2023. That's almost done. So we're about 3/4 complete. Again, our fiscal division, which finally just got back up for the most part from the data breach, they're doing the best they can on this with what they have. So ultimately, they said they could give us a final of everything they have by Wednesday evening, and then we're going to import that. We could go about it one of two ways. It's really kind of a just a look thing. I personally like this look because it lends itself very easily that if I'm very curious if the Oakland Police Department is utilizing an I-Core mini caliber, and I want to just know the information based, on the requirements AB 481, I can just see it all right here. The only downside is it becomes pretty redundant, right? So, but it also lends itself to ensuring the transparency of the law and knowing that we didn't skip anything. So I kind of like that. So what you're going to see here, because you won't see it down here in these, when we get the information, it's going to be essentially copy and paste into each one of these. And the information that ultimately we were able to track and put in there, we'll input it into there. So you won't see that in here tonight because at that point, I think the document's going to be nearly 100 pages. So we're working on that. Now, the important thing, and I really appreciate your expertise in this, and I highly doubt that we missed anything, but it happens, is just seeing if there's something that just in general, like we may not have training costs. We just may not have tracked that, right? But I want to know fundamentally, because that we didn't miss anything here that we have an answer to. Now, coincidentally, on the 16th, the day after I turned in the annual report, our Office of Inspector General held a meeting with us as well. I don't know if it was just exceptional timing or what, but they also came in and reviewed all of this and provided suggestions, and they looked over it as well. So you have multi-facets that are really kind of going over this report. They're slightly different in the sense that they're very concerned with future reporting. Like, is the department going to be adequately capturing everything? And this is when we really went fundamentally into vision and everything it's going to capture, which is why your advice was very helpful in the last meeting, because we realized there's a lot more we have to input into that system, and we captured it early. Because once these things get put in, to change it is very costly. So we're lucky there, and we appreciate that. But for you guys, of course, you want to know the 6 months, right? And we want to get the most information we have most accurately over the 6 months. And I believe we're pretty much there. We just kind of, relying on other partners, fiscal, to get us this information to fulfill the report. Are we going to have everything? Unfortunately not. However, we do have very, very confidence in our moving forward in capturing this data. I think literally the only thing that Vision won't be able to capture is it'll easily capture usage of every item. I just don't think we can get it to where if I say at the beginning of the year I have 100 of an item and we use 25, we have to watch out if it captures 75 practically. But internal audits, which we're required to do anyways, physical manual audits, which you should always do, right? Fixes that regardless. So we have this right here. That should be done by Wednesday. And then we will, and you can see we built in, so where was it up here? Okay, so the anticipated number of units. This is an important one, and I'm glad you guys mentioned that. Because one of the things that we're all talking about is when we want to buy new ones of these, we have to have a system to do this reliably and sometimes expediently. Unfortunately, if something bad happens, or say a drone breaks, we have an accident with the drone, right? We need to replace it quickly. We need to figure out how to expedite purchasing to comport with the law, transparency, but also our needs as an agency. Okay, so moving on here, usage, actual deployment usage was a big part of the thing. So now we could definitely adapt usage into here, and usage is going to be very much adapted into Vision. In fact, Vision makes it so easy. I mean, it's literally going to have the address of exactly where we're at, and that data will be readily available for anything. So in terms of this report and the limited time period, about 7 months, we broke it down to down in here, got our map in, our updated map. We unfortunately see area 6 right here. We unfortunately don't have control over the website, the link. I was hoping that they would update that. They don't. So in the meantime, they can reference this. And then now we're breaking it down to exactly like we said. So here's the item, the Mavic Mini Enterprise 2, the Advanced. How many deployments? How many of those were resulted with warrant? We could have put warrant up top, but again, it's kind of like that redundancy thing, right? Because once we go transition to Vision, which we already have, it's down. But it's been recovered this week, so we're in good shape. This stuff's going to be captured, not just in the number, but I mean, very, very detailed. So we have geographic locations required by the law. 1, 3, 4, 5, 6. Basically, we deployed this in every area of the city with the exception of area 2. But they were never out for more than a day. And that's broken out for every one of them. Every item.
Sorry, can I just stop you? Number of days controlled, what does that refer to?
The number of days. So for example, if we had a community resource vehicle and we left it out for a week straight, that would be 7. Ms. 2? Am I misinterpreting that?
Sorry, I still didn't quite understand the number of days controlled, but I had a different question.
So number of days controlled to our interpretation is that certain military equipment pieces noted by the law could be deployed for multiple days in a row. So if the biggest one would be like a community resource vehicle. So if we had one of those out on a 24/7 operation for a week, then we would put 7. So it was 7 days straight was the longest we had it deployed. Pretty infrequent though. And what was your other question?
Got it. I might suggest renaming it to something that's a little bit more descriptive, so you won't get that question too many more times.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm not trying to be critical because I'm no man of diction, but that is a tough. I mean, it would be awesome to say, number of days deployed in a row. I mean, just keep it simple, right? But I'm not changing anything without your permission.
So it comes from the OMC. I think it's paragraph 3. And the sentence says the police department shall report the number of days controlled equipment was used.
Can I just put days used?
I see. So one interpretation is how long in terms of days the equipment was used each time it was used. Another interpretation could be the number of days in the last calendar day it was used, although it wouldn't necessarily track, let's say, for rifles, perhaps five rifles are deployed on a single day. Wouldn't necessarily capture that, I suppose.
That's a good question. That's a good question. But you know what I think the vision module could do, because there's many ways to look at that question, right? The vision module certainly would capture how many days a year a particular item was deployed. Like, for example, a rifle, because we're not going to count the total number of deployments, right? We could get that data. We can get any data, right? But it could also account for, say we have people are like, well, you use these community resource vehicles a lot. How many days out of 365 days are you using that? Oh, it turns out 250, right? So, wow, that's a really used piece of equipment. The vision module will capture that. And conversely, I could change the Mavic Mini Enterprise 2 here to 37. If to say it was 37 days in the field, right? That would make sense. Or if, say, let's just say happened to be one of them was 5 days in a row, then this would be 42. Again, moving forward, that will all be easily captured.
I suppose the question is, which is better and which do we want?
I know which one I would want, which is if I see 37 deployments, I want to know whether or not that was 37 unique days across the last year, or if it was maybe one day and you deployed 37 times. This is really, really relevant in things like tear gas. Did you deploy them all within like 5 days of the year and you have like 200 deployments across those 5 days? Or was it 200 deployments across 200 days? And so that's like a really, really big difference between the two.
Agreed. And that's a perfect analogy for it, because that's what does happen, right? And tear gas is something used very sparingly. And in under exigent circumstances, you might find yourself using a significant amount. Moving forward with the current system, that's easily captured. For this, not easy at all.
Let me just check one other place. It sounds like the department would not object to listing the number of days in the previous year the controlled equipment was used, meaning, let's say it was 37 deployments across 37 days, it would be 37 days. If it was 37 deployments across 35 days, it would be 35 days. Or, as you mentioned, if it was 37 deployments, but one of those lasted 5 days, it would be 42. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that's exactly right, sir. So there's only one here, I think, that has more than a single day deployment. Let me double check here. No, it's one.
Probably the mobile command vehicle.
Yep. But we've had some unfortunate incidents where we leave a vehicle out overnight and we come back to a burned up mess. So we try and avoid that. No, they're all going to be one. So the arithmetic would be pretty straightforward.
Well, there might be incidents like with the Bearcat, and I think there is with the drone too, where there might be 2 different deployments, one in area 1, one in area 6 on the same day.
Exactly.
Okay, so then you lose that by let's say.
Well, that brings me to the original issue that I wanted to bring up. And I'm curious, Commissioner, if you can give an interpretation on this one. So the OMC requires a breakdown geographically by police area, and then for each police area, reporting the number of days that the equipment was used and which of those were warrants and non-warrants. And so I'm looking at this table and thinking that rather than just be listing the geographical areas, it should be have a couple more columns and show like area 1 had 3 deployments, area 2 had 0, area 3 had 7, area 4 had 10, 5, 6, 7, and just showing the breakdown that way. But I'm curious what you think of that or how you would interpret it.
Before I even get to that, let me just see how the department feels about it. Maybe we can get agreement without a lawyer stepping in.
I mean, can we do it? Yeah, I believe we can. This is one of those data units that, yes, we could capture and put like that. We could do that. And then, understanding, because you guys are very reasonable as well, that we may have to make concessions with some other data. We just don't really have it. This is definitely something we can do.
I think that's an answer.
Yeah. One request for me is if you can, instead of parentheses, making separate columns, so that way you can quickly scan down the list and be able to see any patterns. Like if one area was receiving more deployments than any other areas, then with columns, you'd be able to see that very quickly.
Okay.
I think that means you're adding 4, 5 rows or columns to delineate area.
I think what might be, just for time's sake, what's probably going to end up happening is we're just going to put 6 columns for every single one, but you'll see that some areas like area 2, thanks to Captain Thomason, is always going to have 0, but area 6, not so much.
And I think that has implications for the department too. I'm sure you're probably tracking it anyways about where things get deployed and where it makes sense to station items.
Yeah, no, too. And and even like you said, even if you want to break it down to it, we're going to be able to track which commanders are also putting them out the most. Law doesn't say you have to do that, right? We're going to know who's putting them out the most and who's not, and we're going to get a lot of data.
Okay. Let's perhaps change that number of days controlled. Let's get some consensus on this one, right? Because we do lose if we say, if, as Lieutenant Thomason mentioned, if on a single day the drone is deployed in area 1 and area 6, that unfortunately will only count as 1, counting per day. But we also still know that we still have the total number of deployments.
Yeah, I think, and I see where you're going with it. I do count it as just days, even though there might be more deployments. I think if you keep the deployments box, then you have 37 up there, and then number of days that is controlled, maybe it's 35 or 32 or something like that.
Okay, so I think the label is the number of days in the past reporting period that the controlled equipment is used, or number of days controlled equipment is used in the last year, perhaps. But for this, that's why I say reporting period, because this annual report covers less than a year. It's a little bit more wordy, but more accurate. Mr. Lindsay Paulin, thanks for joining.
Good evening. Yeah, I just got back from teaching a class, and I'm eating my dinner, which is why I'm not on camera. I think I heard Lieutenant Fable say that that enumeration of use of equipment by area is going to be possible for some types of equipment and not for other types. Is that, or that you're counting? You're registering it for some types, but not for other types? I wasn't sure. And if that's the case, I just wondered which types.
No, if I misunderstood, sir. No, the new system going forward is going to capture equal data for all equipment. Much more data too than even the law requires.
I think what Lieutenant Febo was saying was that there are some areas that just may have 0 uses, and we're going to see that with the way we're setting up this report. Yeah.
Okay, I see. Thanks.
Okay, got that. Good. And we clean it up. This is me and my lackluster computer skills here. Okay, we got that. And then it really breaks it down. This is a lot of this equipment stuff that we don't use, and that's a great question on how we're going to get these out of our inventory. Also answering the questions of how we purchase in our inventory. We still need to work with that. So, but again, use it or not, we put everything in the report. For the purposes of this report, this won't be going forward in Vision, okay? Because Vision will break everything down in high detail, everything. But because of the information in this report that we did talk about, we acknowledge that you're going to track complaints, mitigations, alternatives, impacts. We could have put all of these independently in each one piece of equipment upstairs, right? Just like we did with all the other 9. But it's going to make it really big, really big. When most of these are, for this reporting period, are 0. So it's up to you. We can build this independently into this for this report. It's just going to be a lot of redundancy of copy and paste. If that's how you want it, that's how we'll do it. But this comports with the law and its request. There was no complaints associated to military equipment. No identified alternatives at this time for our current equipment. No adverse impacts reported from our public information officers.
To just cut in a little bit, I think for this report, it might be fine to have that. I know in the future years, especially if we do have incidents where we're using tear gas or, having to police protests and stuff, there's going to be a lot more information about complaints and stuff. I don't think there's been a protest in the last 20 years where we don't get complaints from it. So I think going forward, we will have that information. It so happens the last 6 months, we haven't had anything.
So yeah, to Captain Thompson's point, every complaint that would come in from the department would generate a military equipment notification. That's something that we discussed with our Office of Inspector General, that there will be a training rollout to Internal Affairs Division, as well as the police commission, as you guys know. So if you choose with the CPRA to do so, that if we receive a complaint regarding military equipment, that they should do a military equipment notification in Vision. And that allows us to better track these things. And then it can also be associated directly with any use of force or other reporting. So the system should marry up very nicely, not just in notifications in terms of does equipment go out, but are there complaints being generated on scene? It'll tell exactly what the complaint is, who's making the complaint, where is it being made. You should be able to cross-reference, very simple, like how many use of force reports with military equipment on a warrant are generating complaints. We'll easily be able to answer that. Where is that happening? Who's authorizing it? All of that's tracked.
This too.
I want to go back to the question of bundling all of this at the bottom. For the complaints one, if the answer is there are no known IED complaints for all of them, then I think that would be fine. For the others, though, I'm concerned about compliance with the OMC. Specifically, the OMC says that there should be an updated assessment and of impact, and also an updated summary of alternatives, in addition to naming the mitigations. And I'm not sure if this is per equipment or if this is in general. But even if it's in general, I'm just a little bit concerned about saying we have no updates and kind of skipping that part of the law. So
definitely didn't skip it. I spoke with our subject matter expert, Pat Gonzalez, as well as Officer Soto from our munitions team. They're the ones, and you guys all know Steve Toribio, subject matter expert. They were tasked with looking at each relevant piece of equipment. And I should say each instead of all, each one. Hey, is there something on the market right now that's better? Less impact, what's out there? They reviewed them all. There was no change. So like, again, I could put this for each one, but in all of these, it covers each item in accordance. So there was 0 associated complaints for the community resource vehicle or drones. We spoke with the PIO. Was there any at all adverse reaction that you noted from the community when you push out these every 30 days, complaints generated, people's criticisms of this equipment? The answer was no. So again, I could copy and paste this into every single one of them independently, but I think because there was zeros on all these, we're just creating work for nothing. In the next one report, and I sound like a broken record here, that's going to be very easily tracked.
One question.
Mhm.
What are the chances that you are going to be promoted or reassigned and you will not be doing the next annual report? I don't say it with any sort of connotation. I just wonder. Obviously, this is institutional memory.
Yes.
None of us may be here by next year, and we may all forget, or there may not be anyone here to remember that we only did this because there were 0 for the entire report.
That's a great point. So to answer your first question, the probability of me being here next year, 0. This position is really coveted for, and I don't say that disparagingly. The special operations section is a highly specialized position for people like Lieutenant Toribio, who have been on the entry teams, sniper teams, and just really understand this stuff. It's really not my strength, I would say, in the agency. And I'm very fortunate to be cross-trained here because you got to have diverse people, right? But there's absolutely more qualified people. And that's the reason why we've put so much energy into the vision system, that no matter who sits in this seat, it's going to be, the report out should be digital, right? And very simple. Now, you always have to have redundancy because, as we've proven, our computer systems can go down quick. We have an analyst, a civilian analyst, Ms. Kima Joseph, does a wonderful job, and she's dedicated solely to this mission. And I don't see any possibility of turnover there anytime soon. And of course, always as required, I would back train somebody else. But there's a lot of talented people who will be able to take the reins with this.
Mr. Lindsay Pullen?
Yeah, I wanted to specifically look at the question of alternatives, because that's something that is not driven by a public-facing activity. It's not driven by complaints. It's not driven by, it's really driven by technology. And the technology for demobilizing people, stopping them for what they're doing, catching people is changing. Surveilling people or surveilling things, it's definitely changing. I mean, I'm seeing lots of departments that are deciding to get different drone technology, or even different technology that is less impactful for people that the department, that law enforcement wants to kind of rein in, So I just, it doesn't seem realistic to me that the department is not looking at that. And I think this question about what alternative method or methods the department considered relates to that. It relates to because that's going to be also if the department is looking at acquiring new equipment, new models of things or new types of things. It's going to come out of a consideration of other means to get to the same end.
This too?
I wanted to look at a different part, which is the impact part. And what I'm reading here is, it says the department's public information office indicates there were no known adverse impacts from the use of controlled equipment. And this just feels really at odds for me with the impact reports that we've been looking at. I could understand if there were 0 deployments, that there might be no updated knowledge about the impact of deploying this equipment. But if equipment has been deployed, then that means that the department has had some experience. I don't care what the public information office has to say about it. I care about what the department was able to learn experientially through that deployment, because that deployment, I'm not interested in whether someone complained about the deployment. I'm interested in, is the department proactively considering and engaging with how did that deployment of militarized equipment impact the community, and what was it within the impact statement that we already have, or is there a newly known to us impact that we weren't thinking about already? And so this part about the PIO and not seeing any adverse impacts just doesn't really seem to mesh with what we've been talking about around impact reports.
So to answer your question, Ms. Tu, so first of all, for impact, when we look at these, we had to define metric, right? And it wasn't spelled out specifically, like you got to go to this source, this source, this source, and this source for information. We had to go with what we had. But that's also why, again, we've developed in Vision so many cross-reference points of data. Now, I could certainly put under our updated assessment all of the reasons why we train procedural justice, we train footprint on the community, and why we keep the emergency rescue vehicle inside of the warehouse until the actual deployment to mitigate that, right? But that's kind of blanket information. And does that hold any value to the reader, right? It's just canned answer, right? So this says updated assessment, right? Is there something that's new to be garnered from this information that we got? And the answer is, with our current metric, no. Moving forward, there's going to be a lot of information that we could pull from the data that will have this, right? So the impact report that we're going to put out next year is going to be significantly different, right? Now, to Mr. Poland's point, so I put it out there to my subject matter experts to look at all this equipment. And if there's one thing I have to say about tactical team officers and team leaders, is these guys are like car guys, right? They love new technology. If they see something new, they're going to hound me for it, right? Even if I don't have the budget, and they know that. We reviewed the military equipment uses, and they said there's nothing indeed that they believe is immediately pressing to replace it, the better alternative. Ironically, though, there was a significant piece of equipment that we did find an alternative for. It just didn't fall under the military equipment. And we're going to the Public Safety Committee this week to present that. Very specifically because of the negative impact the helicopter has on the community. It just didn't fall under militarized equipment. But we are looking into that. And I do have to trust the subject matter experts who review this equipment, train with it, utilize it every day. Could this change for 2023? Absolutely. Because I do recognize the technology, especially with drones, is changing fast. I would be shocked if we didn't have a lot of alternatives under the drone technology next year.
Ms. Tu?
I hear you on the wanting to get a lot of quantitative data from Vision, and being able to just give a much more comprehensive view of what's going on with Vision. I'm still not sure how that will line up with the impact, though, because impact is about qualitative data. It's about descriptive information, not about numbers. And so I just don't see how something like Vision, no matter how much quantitative information you capture, you'll be able to come out with a qualitative assessment that shows what that impact was. Just one really quick example that I was talking about with John is I was looking at some of the armored vehicle deployments, and I was just skimming for fun, and I happened to see this one line that mentioned that the vehicle was deployed with the SWAT team, and because of something that someone had called in, something really violent that was happening. And then it turned out to be a false call. Someone had done what's called swatting, which is where you pretend that you're someone in a different place, and in order to get the cops to show up with a SWAT team and come in and terrorize and potentially kill someone. And so if that were to happen, I would expect to, in the past couple of months, then I don't expect Vision to be able to capture that information. I would expect the department to have that conversation internally and come back and make a note, an updated note on the impact of, hey, this is one potential impact of deploying this equipment, and this is one potential impact that our community needs to be that affects our community and needs to be part of the report. And I just don't see how Vision would be a part of that. And I don't really agree with this, with having the PIO say that there are no known adverse impacts. Like, they can say that, but it doesn't seem to belong in the annual report.
So Vision will definitely capture that, say a swatting call and more. And here's why. So when I look at impact, right? So it says specifically safety, right? We track injuries. We have a specific checkbox for injuries, community member and officer.
Right.
Civil
Assuming there were
rights.
no injuries, because that's what the report said.
Right. Well, I'm talking about moving forward, right? I can only go on the data that I have for this report from the PIOs and IED and stuff like that. But say your swatting call is a good example, right? Would it capture that? Yes, it certainly would, right? Because there's also a narrative that belongs to every one of them. If there's a civil rights violation, it'll be capturing it under internal affairs in Vision. Civil liberties, same thing, okay? And then, welfare, obviously it has risk management built into these. All of this information that it says under impact is going to be captured. And if you want to look at it more specifically, right? You want to find out if there's swatting calls, it's going to be in the narrative. You can read the report.
I mean, personally, I don't want to know if there were swatting calls. I mean, I do want to know that. What I want to know is that the department is identifying that this is something that is impacting the community and actively looking for the impacts and including that.
Lieutenant Toribio?
We will have the data. So to the extent that
Lieutenant Toribio?
So to the extent that we have our Office of Inspector General, right? We have independent oversight.
Sorry, if I can really quick. Yeah, I think so there are a couple different things here. So one, in terms of the actual data, there's a narrative component that is included in the reporting for military equipment like the drones, armored vehicles, or whatnot, where there's a summary of the event. So that's where, like, for example, the swatting incident would be captured. But what I think Ms. Tu is saying, and where I think the department needs to look at, is establishing a mechanism to kind of pick and pull things that are identified in these incidents that are relevant to either an impact report or the annual report. So this is, I mean, just me looking at this now, this is all kind of like a new experience for us, and expectations and procedural requirements. And it's just something that we're going to need to note and work through. So, I mean, this is kind of like a living document, right? This annual report and impact reports may need to be adjusted accordingly. So I think what we're going to have to do on our end is establish some kind of mechanism for identifying if or when either impact reports need to change, or identifying relevant data for inclusion in the annual report in order to address like the specific points that maybe aren't present just in the inclusion of the data itself, where it's maybe a little bit more esoteric. And we've got to say, oh, you know what, like, I understand that this is an incident regarding X, but X kind of holds some relevance that affects kind of a different part of, how kind of we're deploying this equipment, or at least how the deployment affects the community or the department or whatever. So that's something that I agree. It has to be addressed. And I think part of this, hopefully, this committee is in place for is to kind of one, identify, oh, you know what? Wow, this is something that needs to be addressed, and two, how we can do it. So I think at least on the department side, we're getting that. Yeah, there's needs to be something in place when looking at the data to address points that are needing to be put out in the annual report or impact reports or whatnot. I don't know if that makes sense.
Let me try to sum up. We started off this conversation by asking whether or not these four things here, complaints, summary, and internal audits, mitigations, alternatives, and an impact, should go at the end of the document or should go under each particular section. I think what we're hearing is that the department has gone through these. And I think the department has done a lot of thought into going into, well, what are we doing with these? What were the deployments like? What have we learned from them? What are the things that we have learned? What mitigations do need to be in place? What alternatives have we considered? And the department has said, we've gone through it and we've contacted our subject matter experts, and we don't think that there are any additional potential impacts that we haven't addressed. We don't think that there are any additional mitigations that are needed. We don't think that there are any additional alternatives that would be better. I think that having it in summary format at the end of the document is a disservice to the department because it doesn't show the amount of work that you all have done in getting to this point, right? And not only does it not show that work, but it also does not convey that amount of work to interested parties in the community. I think it would be, I don't think it's a whole lot more work. I think that if there are no updated impacts, mitigations, or alternatives, then you say that our subject matter experts have looked into it and there are no updated impacts, mitigations, or alternatives other than what we've identified in the previous impact report, right? That probably will require attaching the impact reports to the annual reports, which suggests that, yes, you should have this section at the end of each controlled equipment section.
I think that makes sense. I do. So what I can do is I can put the definitions above and then just make it and then just trim it out to mitigations, alternatives, and impact under each one. How's that sound?
I think you'll need the complaints summary and the summary of internal audits as well as we break down and move into future years, especially hearing that you are not going to be necessarily doing this next year.
I hope I am, but yes, you got to prepare for the worst.
I also hear Lieutenant Toribio recognizing that the updated assessments and the updated summaries are not just the data points, which are very informative and will tell us a lot, but sort of require an additional step of thinking about the data and analyzing it and coming to conclusions about it. Those conclusions, that analysis may be maybe the same, may be different than what you have already identified. But I think this document helps both the department identify when it needs to do that thinking, how it needs to do that thinking, and conveys to the community that it is doing that thinking, which is, I think, what the point of this particular report is. I think I've probably talked enough, Mr. Lindsay Poland.
Yeah, thanks. I like where this discussion is going. And I think you did a great job of pointing out just how much is missing that the department does do that doesn't come through. And so I'm wondering if one possible path forward is to include that information, like has been suggested, of showing where, of describing where the work has happened. And also, because we're thinking about that year-to-year consistency and carrying things forward, identifying work that needs to happen over the coming year, especially with the data platform coming online. And just being really explicit about what information isn't included this year that will be included in the following year's report, just so that way and explaining why it's not possible to include in this year's report. So just making sure that that it's very clear of what the department is doing, who you're talking with, how you're thinking about those narratives and those incidents that have been happening, and what you've identified for this report, and what you're not able to identify for this report, the plans for the following year.
Yeah, so I think one of the big things is that one of the benefits of the system that we've installed in place, going to the commission to review purchases of the equipment, that already affords us exactly, we know it going forward, how it's being funded, approval, when we bought it. That's going to be very easily tracked, unlike right now. Our fiscal division, that's what they do. And they're going to give us the best, data available to them by Wednesday. But I'm pretty confident, I'm sure everybody on this moving forward knows that just because of the built-in system that we have, the fiscal portion of this and the procurement of equipment and dates established is going to be much easier to track just by the system in and of itself.
Mr. Lindsay Poland.
I'm glad to hear that. I confess I have been in organizations that are always saying that the new information technology going forward is going to be so much better, and it's not always the case. Doesn't always live up to its promise. I've lived through many of those experiences, but I'm glad to hear that it looks like it will. I wanted to actually go back to the alternatives because I think, you can correct me, but I believe that the requirement here is not what better alternatives were considered. Like it's what alternatives were considered. So your car guys who are looking at everything that's coming online are seeing things and they're saying, nah, that's what we got is really better. That, as I understand it, that consideration of what they saw that they determined was not as good is still something to be reported. And I think it's important that it be reported because, in all frankness, not everyone shares the same criteria or priorities about what is better technology, what is a better piece of equipment. For the operator, they're going to have a certain set of criteria. But I think that this provision is saying, what else did you consider? What else did you look at? And report that. Then we can see in the community and the commission and the elected officials what else was considered and apply our own criteria. Might be the same result, but it gives us an understanding of what are the possible routes in terms of equipment. So again, correct me if I'm misinterpreting this, but I think it's saying anything else that could accomplish the same thing, even if in the operator's view, it's not as good.
I think that's a good point that you bring up. I don't know if that's going to be possible for this report because we're talking about, things that we don't use, and that could be in terms of timelines in order to accomplish that, because that was never part of our discussion, could be immense.
Yeah, and I remember you're saying it's an iterative document. I totally understand that. But if this can be memorialized in some way going forward, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, good point.
Might be, well, it's 7:40 and I wanted to save some time to talk a little bit about potential public forum and coming back and deadlines if we have any, so that Lieutenant Febble may perhaps gets a break and then comes back to this for all the hard work that he's done and his staff have done to put all this data together. I don't think our local ordinance requires that it go to commission by our May 11th meeting. So I would say that the deadline for that would be approximately our May 8th meeting. Probably more the week after, probably more like May 5th. But I also know that Mr. Lindsay Poland and Ms. Tu have been working on a location for a potential public forum that may also work within those timelines. I'm wondering if they can tell us a little bit more.
So I've been talking with some of the youth organizations in the city who are interested in these issues. Often our young people are the most impacted by the deployments of military equipment. In any case, they're interested in the issue. So these are organizations like 67 Sueños that Erickson Amaya, who is nominally on this committee, hasn't been here lately, but he's part of 67 Sueños, which works with particularly migrant high school youth in Oakland. Also Urban Peace Movement, also Bay Peace, also Young Women's Freedom Center. They have something that they call Coach Up, which is an event that they do every month, and it's different every month. And it's often a kind of an educational event, or it's a community event. They do different things. And so I approached them about hosting a community engagement meeting in which the department would present its annual report and have opportunities for engagement and questions and conversations about it. And they were actually pretty enthusiastic. There's still some discussion going on. There's several organizations, and I was mostly just having this discussion with them last week. But they have a coach up on May 24th that would be hosted by Bay Peace, which has been very interested in this whole issue. We've talked with them a lot about AB 481 and about the local ordinance. And I don't know what the physical location would be, but they generally get like 40 something young people coming to these. And, maybe, I don't know whether it would be more in this case or similar, but if the timing works, so that I told them, okay, that would require, because the state law says that the community engagement meeting has to be within 30 days of the posting of the report, it would mean that the report would not be able to be, if we went with that May 24th idea, the report couldn't be posted until April 24th or thereafter, sometime thereafter. So I expect to have a little bit more information in the next few days, but it seems like there's strong support from 67 Sueños, from Urban Peace Movement, and probably from Bay Peace.
I'm gonna take a moment to let that sink in and just confirm a few things. May 24th, is that a Wednesday?
Yes.
And what time are their meetings usually?
I believe, yes, I did ask them this. I think they're like 4 to 6 usually, something like that.
And then location wise, you may not have the exact information about the space, but do you know which part of Oakland it's in?
I think they've done it sometimes at the what's that place on International and 22nd, the East Side Cultural Center, East Side Arts Center, and that's has good space. It's accessible to a lot of people.
Let me have some, well, does anybody from the department have thoughts?
So my only thoughts, sir, is that when the discussion did come up over the meeting. I'll have to defer to the suggestion of my chief. What he suggested last time was that it also is the commission meeting is a public forum where people can express themselves, and that was his suggestion, was to hold it at that forum. Obviously, I can't speak for the chief suggesting that he wouldn't be open to other options, but I think that it's best that we provide all options, but I will have to default to his last suggestion.
Okay, do you think that perhaps, because we are going to have a presentation on the annual report as required by the local ordinance on May 11th, but this idea came up as a thought that, you know, commission meetings, you don't get a whole lot of back and forth engagement and discussion and discourse and as much as you would say at a community engagement meeting, or having, say, members of the community part of a panel of some sort, or be able to ask questions directly and get them answered. Not everything gets answered. And especially this being a section of the community that generally doesn't come to commission meetings, I think would be beneficial to really get a broader spectrum of input. I'm not asking you to make a decision today, but perhaps we could ask, or the department could ask the chief or other members of the decision-making team if thoughts about such a community engagement meeting.
Always happy to deliver you guys' message to the chief. So, it's great to have options. Happy to deliver it. And whatever he says, that's what we'll do.
Really hope so, because if the department's not there for this meeting outside of the commission meeting, then there won't be a meeting essentially. Miss Two?
I think the other two issues that had come up were, if this is agenda item 6, 10, 11, it can be challenging to hold a community meeting and not know what time exactly the discussion will begin. And then the other thing is, because it's a Brown Acted meeting, it might be logistically challenging to fulfill the state law requirements around giving the public the opportunity to have discussion and to ask questions. So those were two of the other concerns that we had been talking about. But like the commissioner says, this is supposed to be a meeting that's done by the department. But we're happy to support with working with community organizations to increase that community engagement.
Also, this means that we don't have to have the annual report done until after April 24th. So that also gives us
sold, sir, sold. I'll do 4 meetings.
Okay, let's keep this discussion going. Let's get a little bit more details about space and where that next meeting might be. Let's see if we can perhaps let the department mull over the idea and see what they think of, and perhaps come back to this on April 24th, which is our next meeting. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, April 24th sounds good.
And I think if you check with the chief and you get something back before then, it would be really helpful to know even before the 24th.
Yeah, we'll certainly send your message. It would be great, Mr. Poland, if you could send me kind of the dates and venue that you had in mind. It sounds like you put a lot of work into it. I'd like to be able to forward that to him. But
Okay.
And I'll also incorporate our public information officers. They are the ones who typically are very good about finding good forums for these types of things. We'll bring them all in the loop.
Okay.
Lieutenant Feble, is there anything else in this annual report that you would like to present for tonight?
No, thank you, everybody, for your input.
Okay. Any thoughts for anyone on the annual report that we have seen thus far? This too?
I've got one more that I saw when I was rereading the OMC. There are some clauses around whether the equipment was used or purchased in the preceding year. And so I just want to flag that that's something that the OMC was. Let me try and find the exact section. If the equipment was neither used nor purchased in the immediately preceding calendar year, then the police commission may waive the remaining obligations. That's item number 1, the kind of the tail end of a long paragraph for OMC 965-010. I don't know if that applies to any of these though.
I would say members of the department, if you think one of something applies,
I think there are a
perhaps-
couple things, guys, that we're not going to be using anymore, like our 37 millimeters and stuff like that. You could see them in the report. They're just flat not used. And, we're phasing them out. But Lieutenant Toribio or other subject matter expert could talk more to that, but every piece of equipment is noted in here, but you will see some specifically are just never used.
Like shields too. We're never going to use shields.
Great point. Great point.
It's on there.
Let's think about this. I would say that if you're crunched for time for the next meeting or the 24th, maybe focus on the equipment that you are using, and let me think about if we're going to about invoking that section.
Yeah, sounds great.
Thanks for the heads up. Okay, anything else? All right. Enjoy your remaining 7 minutes and the rest of the evening. I will see you all on April 24th at 6 p.m.
Sounds
Thanks,
great,
sir.
everyone. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. Good night.
Night.
Thanks for a great meeting.
Good
Have a
night.
good night.